There's a Riyadh Comedy Festival. I don't know if you heard about that. This is true. There's a Riyadh, Saudi Arabia Comedy Festival.
For the Saudi princes?
Yeah, everyone's doing it. It's like, for Saudis? Weren't those the 9/11 guys?
You're going to have a maid that doesn't have access to her passport, whether you like it or not. You're a Filipino woman who's trapped in the desert.
Human Rights Watch has been begging the comedians not to participate in the whitewashing of the horrors that are ongoing.
I am doing this because they're paying me enough money to look the other way.
How do you even promote that?
From the people that brought you 9/11, we present the Riyadh Comedy Festival, where the world's biggest comedians sell their souls to whitewash an authoritarian regime responsible for countless human rights abuses. Enjoy an evening of government-approved jokes and delicious food served to you by literal slaves. You'll laugh so hard that you'll forget all about the genocide we did a few years ago. Afterwards, you can visit Saudi Arabia's beautiful sights, like the prison where we keep women's rights activists, or the square where we execute journalists for criticizing the government. Ooh boy, I am hyped for the Riyadh Comedy Festival. All my favorite comedians are going to be there. Bill Burr, Dave Chapelle, Kevin Hart, this guy. Why is he screaming? Oh look, they even got women. I wonder if they got permission from a male guardian to tell jokes. Oh, I see Pete Davidson's going. That's nice. You know, it just shows the power of forgiveness. You know, his dad died in 9/11 and now he's doing jokes for the people responsible for killing him. So, I'm kidding. Everybody knows George Bush. Man, when I first saw this, I legitimately thought it was a joke. Like, what's next? The Kabul Chuckle Fest? Just for laughs, Pyongyang? But no, it's real. At some point, Saudi Arabia realized that this oil money ain't gonna last forever, and they need to modernize. They need to become a player in the global field. So, in an attempt to clean up their image, they've spent millions of dollars on mega projects, sports, and now comedy. It's actually genius. They're paying these useful idiots millions of dollars to whitewash the kingdom's, let's call them issues. And when I say issues, I'm talking about all these things I'm listing on screen right now, okay? Some pretty horrendous stuff. Now, guys, I'm just a pedestrian at the end of the day, and I know in my heart I should never question our nation's brave comedians, but I don't know, guys. Something about Saudi Arabia just doesn't sit right with me. You know, the more I hear about this country, the less I care for it. So I'm gonna go ahead and lay out some of Saudi Arabia's problematic features, and you guys can tell me if these comedians should be performing there. Now, this whole event is being organized by a guy named Turki Al-Sheikh, who is the chairman of Saudi Arabia's Entertainment Authority. You may have heard about him because of his boxing partnership with famous woman beater Dana White.
We have just done a deal to start a new boxing league with Turkey.
Turkey is a childhood friend of Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman and one of his top advisors. He helped MBS on his rise to power and even participated in the infamous Ritz-Carlton purge where MBS imprisoned 300 of his rivals inside of a hotel. Today, Turkey is one of the most powerful men in the kingdom, and he definitely uses that power, sometimes for good, but not always. Shortly before he was cut into pieces and stuffed inside a suitcase, journalist Jamal Khashoggi had this to say about Turkey. He is very thuggish. People fear him. If you challenge him, you might end up in prison. And that has happened. Now, we'll come back to Khashoggi in just a second, but what he said is 100% correct. Several people have ended up in prison for the crime of making fun of Al-Sheikh's soccer team. Now, I'm not even joking. There's a prison in the middle of the desert just outside of Riyadh where 5,000 people are held, including terrorists, political prisoners, women's rights activists, and people who criticize Turkey on Twitter. According to a former prisoner, I know one guy who replied to one of Turkey's tweets complaining that his team lost. He had nothing to do with politics, he was just a football fan, and he was imprisoned just for that tweet. Another guy got sentenced to 18 years in prison for criticizing how Al-Sheikh ran his soccer team. Al-Hayr prison has an entire wing named after Turkey because he put so many people in there for clowning on it. And let me tell you, the conditions in these prisons are pretty brutal, okay? People are beaten, tortured, and even hung upside down by their heels. I don't know, man. Seems like a pretty chill dude to do business with. Now, I brought up Jamal Khashoggi briefly. Let's talk about him for a second, because that whole situation kind of got memory hold. To refresh your memory, Jamal Khashoggi was a journalist who had a falling out with the Saudi royal family and became one of their most vocal critics. On October 2nd, 2021, Khashoggi went to the Saudi consulate in Turkey to get some documents. Here's CCTV footage of him walking in, but there's no footage of him coming out. That's because, like Tony Hinchcliffe, he never came out. An investigation done by the Saudis themselves, by the way, concluded that Khashoggi was forcibly restrained and injected with a large amount of a drug, resulting in an overdose that led to his death. His body was then dismembered and handed over to a local collaborator for disposal. According to the Saudi government, the 5 men responsible for Khashoggi's death were rogue agents, and the crown prince had no knowledge of the scheme. In fact, it wasn't even premeditated. The CIA says otherwise, though. Okay, but this was all the way back in 2018, maybe they've changed since then. Now, back in June, just a few months ago, another journalist was executed for treason and terrorism. In other words, he was tweeting things critical of the government. In 2018, Al-Jasser was kidnapped, imprisoned, and tortured for 7 years before ultimately being executed. Jasser was just one of the 100 executions carried out in Saudi just this year alone. Most of them without due process. So, yeah, I guess it's safe to say the Saudi government does not like to be criticized. Closeted straight man and human pig chimera Tim Dillon learned this the hard way. He was supposed to perform in Riyadh but was dropped after making fun of the Saudis on his podcast.
I was fired from the Riyadh Comedy Festival. My agent called me and he goes, they heard what you said about them having slaves. And I said, I was being positive about it. I was defending them. I was saying that if I was a slave, not that I want to be, if I was a slave, and I built a really nice thing, I might say to my slave children, Daddy built that. They didn't like that. You pushed me into the bosom of Iran. I'm going to Tehran to do their comedy festival.
Oh, and he brought up the slavery thing, which brings me to my next topic. Imagine you're a comedian and you're offered $300,000 to do a show in Riyadh. When you land, the show promoter takes your passport away and says you're actually only going to be paid $300 and you have no way of leaving the country. Well, that's exactly what happens to a lot of foreign workers living in these Gulf Arab countries. All the skyscrapers, shopping malls, and luxury hotels are built on the backs of exploited laborers from poor countries. Almost half of Saudi Arabia's population is made up of migrant workers, usually from Africa and Southeast Asia. And if women are second-class citizens, then migrants are fourth. Most of them are lured to the kingdom with promises of a good salary and a better life, but instead, they often end up working extremely long hours for little money, and they can't even go home. I think there's a word for this. I forget what it is. It'll come back to me. Most of these immigrants are brought in through kafala, a work sponsorship program popular in the Gulf Arab countries. It gives employers complete control over their employees' legal status, meaning they own you. Slavery. That's the word. I said it earlier, multiple times. Basically, recruitment agencies trick poor people into thinking they're getting the opportunity of a lifetime, but in reality, they're signing their lives away to some company. I mean, to be honest, that sounds like any job, but trust me, this is much, much worse. Once the workers get to their destination, they quickly realize that their dream job is actually a nightmare. The first thing that happens is their employer takes their passport and phone away, and then the actual work starts. Workers reported having to clock in 12 to 15-hour shifts with no overtime, and they received less money than they were promised. They were also forced to live in squalor, crammed into dirty, bug-infested apartments with up to 15 people sharing one room. And if they have a problem with that, well, tough shit. They can't leave the country or change jobs without their sponsor's consent. If they are granted permission, then they have to pay a fee plus cover their own transportation costs, which they can't afford. Oh, and I haven't even gotten to the death part yet. Now, you guys might remember a few years ago when Qatar hosted the FIFA World Cup that they were getting a bunch of shit for the way they treated their migrant workers. Between 2010 and 2019, over 10,000 people died building their soccer stadiums and hotels. Now, surely Saudi Arabia, who's set to host the World Cup in 2034, learned from Qatar's mistakes, right?
Well, scores of migrants have died in gruesome yet avoidable workplace-related accidents in Saudi Arabia as the government there ramps up construction work ahead of the 2034 World Cup. That's according to Human Rights Watch, which says those who've died have done so after falling from buildings, having been electrocuted, or in some cases even decapitated.
Okay, maybe not. 884 migrant workers from Bangladesh died in Saudi Arabia between January and July 2024, a 6-month period. 80% of these deaths were uninvestigated and attributed to natural causes, thus not eligible for compensation. Now, to be fair, the Saudi government did implement labor reforms to fix some of these issues, but they're not really enforced too well. And the reforms didn't apply to the 4 million domestic workers living in Saudi because they're considered servants and not workers. According to a report from Amnesty International from just a few months ago, female domestic workers in particular still face horrendous abuse.
2.8 million women work as maids in the Middle East. Many have their passports confiscated on arrival, and some find themselves trapped inside homes where they're overworked, underpaid, and physically abused.
A typical workday consisting of a minimum of 16 hours, often more, of cleaning, cooking, and looking after children. They were paid on average $240 per month, and none were paid overtime, meaning their average wage equated to about 50 cents per hour. Some employers delayed the women's salaries or did not pay them at all. And that's not even the worst part. Many of the women recounted they were shouted at, called names, and humiliated, while others were sexually assaulted and in some cases raped by their male employers. You know, if I was a comedian being paid hundreds of thousands of dollars and being catered to by actual slaves, that would make me feel a bit uncomfortable personally. But hey, I guess a comedian's brain just works differently. Us civilians can't possibly comprehend it. Now, guys, all this slavery business is obviously terrible, but it's not even the worst thing that the Saudi government has done, believe it or not. A lot of these comedians are very outspoken about Gaza, especially Bill Burr and Dave Chapelle, which is good. We should call out Israel for, committing war crimes and whatnot. But the thing is, not too long ago, Saudi Arabia did the same thing in Yemen that Israel is currently doing in Gaza. In 2014, the Houthis, a Shia rebel group, captured Yemen's capital and forced the president to go into exile. Now, the Houthis are backed by Saudi's arch nemesis, Iran. And they couldn't have that, so in 2015, a coalition of Sunni Arab states led by Saudi Arabia attacked Yemen to try and reinstate the old government. Now, despite what political streamers on Twitch might say, the Houthis are not good guys. But this campaign went way too far. It resulted in what the UN called the worst humanitarian crisis in the world. Saudi intervention in Yemen has included massive airstrikes. Over a third have targeted civilian areas, including hospitals, homes, markets, schools, and mosques, directly killing over 12,000 civilians. Saudi naval blockades have cut off food supplies. Thousands of children have died of starvation. A cholera epidemic affected 800,000 civilians and killed thousands. 80% of the population depends on humanitarian relief. At least 233,000 civilians have died in Yemen's civil war. This sounds kind of familiar. Yeah, no, that's definitely pretty much exactly what Israel's doing in Gaza right now, except for some reason there was no public outcry about this. I guess the PR campaign is working. Now, Saudi Arabia has gotten less involved in the war since 2022, which is good, but at the end of the day, the damage is done. And the same people are still in charge, and now comedians are taking their blood money. It's insane to me. I mean, these people make millions of dollars. Not a single one of these comedians is not a millionaire. And it's still not enough for them. They get up on stage or on their podcasts and moralize to us civilians, but in reality, they have no morals. They have no integrity. Tim Dillon said it best.
It's very simple. If you pay me lots of money, I will not comment on what's going on. In fact, I will ignore it. And if something that I really disagree with is happening, the more money you pay me, the less I'm going to think about it.
And if one of these people ever gets called out, their defense is always, well, I'm just a comedian. Well, that's true. And that's why these people should never be taken seriously. Joe Rogan and his ilk have somehow gaslit us into thinking that comedians are this elite group of philosophers and truth tellers.
A comic's brain is so different than a pedestrian's brain.
When it comes down to it, comedians are what they've always been. Clowns. I'm saying this as a comedy fan, by the way, okay? I'm not some kind of fucking wet blanket. Luckily, though, not every comedian is an irredeemable sellout. Greek Giga Chad Stavros Halkias called out some of his pals for participating in the Riyadh Comedy Festival.
And then September 11th, Saudi Arabia with... Oh, you fucking piece of shit. You're all fucking pieces of shit. Everyone doing all the people cleaning your sheets are just Filipino slaves.
Shane Gillis, another GOAT, also had the integrity to turn down the Saudi blood money.
Yeah,
perpetrated 9/11.
I'm not doing it.
That is good. I admire that.
Then they doubled the bag, and I was like, it was a significant bag.
What?
Yeah, but I'd already said no. You know, I took a principled stand.
It's good to know that there's at least a few chuckleheads with some principles out here. I think the only way these schmucks can regain back the respect they've lost is if they go on stage and start shit-talking the regime. But I highly doubt they're gonna risk their paychecks or a trip to a desert jail. Now guys, I do have to concede that Saudi Arabia is slowly getting better. They're not as bad as they were even 5 years ago, okay? Women can drive. The religious authorities are a bit less strict. Hell, even Jews are allowed to enter the country now. That being said, I think they still have a long way to go before I go to VidCon Riyadh, which I'm sure is going to be a thing soon. You know what? Fuck it. I'll do it for 50K. Just kidding. There's only one dictator I would ever perform for.
متحدين ولمحط بعنوان